Hello and welcome to the season 2 of Sustainability 100 Plus. Today we are hosting another masterclass on an eminent topic. Why does ESG matter to companies? We have Ashwin Kak, who is currently Director Procurement and Sustainability for AB InBev India and Southeast Asia. He spearheads efforts across key sustainability focus areas for the company. He is a qualified business economics and marketing expert and has almost 12 plus years of experience across sales, strategy, CSR, corporate affairs, procurement, and sustainability domains. He is passionate about responsible supply chain, sustainability, micro entrepreneurship, cause driven marketing, cross industry partnership development, and diversity and inclusion. Welcome, Ashwin. We have 5 questions for you today and look forward for your insights on them. So starting off with the first question. How does ESG matter for companies and why?
Thank you, Sugandha. Thank you for having me in, and a good bunch of masterclasses that are ongoing right now. So to your specific question, when we look at ESG, right, I think ESG at some level, the terminology has been very recent. But if you look at what corporates have been doing in their own base, they are addressing it through different functions that work on these activities. So if I could just quickly split this into the three main components that ESG has. When you essentially look at the environment piece, you often have the plant or brewing operations team in our cases, along with the sustainability team, which are inherently looking at many environment related actions. From an S perspective, a lot of what the sustainability team does also has very direct impact on the community. And then you also have, in our case, and also in the case of many other companies, the corporate affairs team or the strategic CSR team, which is leading a lot of initiatives which have a social aspect at the core of it. And then, of course, from a governance perspective, you have your HR policies, your human right policies, different things around ethics and compliance, different functions driving it, which sort of ensures you have a very robust governance mechanism. So I would say what ESG has done is that it has created this central framework of a sustainable and a responsible corporate. It makes it very easy, I would say, compared to 5 years back, for corporates to know what are the benchmarks, what are the KPIs, hence how they should be working towards it, and then ultimately report on it. So from that perspective, ESG does create a very good framework and a reporting mechanism, right? It eventually leads to a very intelligent reporting mechanism, a consistent one, which also prevents every corporate to sort of have their own methodologies that they can work on. The more consistent corporates within and across industries are, the more easy it also becomes for investors, for consumers, for everyone to read different reports from the different perspective and then evaluate, which company is doing it better.
Thank you so much, Ashwin, for the brief insight on how does ESG matter for companies. Moving on to the next question. Does paying attention to ESG compromise on the company's bottom line?
Not really. I would say gone are the time when we used to have debates on should we be focusing on shareholder theory or stakeholder theory. I think it's all subsumed into each other in many ways. Where when we are also talking about license to operate now, right, from a operations or a brewing operations perspective, we are not just talking about a legal or a regulatory license to operate. We are also talking about a social license to operate, which is very much integrated into it. So a lot of actions which corporates are now taking in their own, either their own supply chain or the larger value chain, is also leading to long-term profitability in many senses. It will only be a conflict when the only time frame we have is the next quarter to look at, because often a lot of sustainability and ESG action might not give you the returns in the next quarter, but they will give you sustainability of your overall health of your own operations over a medium to long term. So it depends on that benchmark of the timeline that you're looking at. And that's where a lot of the dissonance can be cut if we understand that not every ESG intervention or sustainability project would necessarily have a 3-month return or a timeline to show you very quick results. So probably a change in the perspective or the way we look at it would help remove that dissonance which still exists maybe in some quarters.
Absolutely true. And since you talked about how it impacts with respect to value creation, the third question is with respect to that. How does a strong ESG proposition links to the value creation for the company? How does it sort of translates for the organization?
Oh, absolutely. It's ESG investing as a concept itself is becoming so huge. When I myself am creating my own SIP portfolio, I'm looking at which are the ESG portfolios I can invest in, right? That's probably an individual investor's perspective, if I can give you. From an institutional investor perspective, it's becoming very clear, not just in the banking and non-banking financial sector domain, but also in VCs across. You can see so many startups at which are very fresh and at the starting and inception stage of their journey, which are getting millions and millions of dollars because they have an idea which is sort of bringing about a social or an environment transformation. The same thing is sort of also extending into what we as corporates and our investors are asking out of us. So that's probably a magnified impact that we see across.
So true. Like that has been gaining. You can say amongst the millennials, that is something that everyone is talking about and looking
The
for.
consumer piece, of course. Sorry, I forgot that. I think that's the most critical piece, right? And uh, I I forget that now more than I would have 10 years back, because just a decade back, you had more voices from outside the organization asking the organization to be more sustainable and responsible. Now those voices are within our ecosystem. It can be our own colleagues, it can be our customers and consumers who are demanding more things out of us. That's where you see a lot of innovative transformations, for example, in a circular packaging portfolio, right? What we call as one of our sustainability goals, where we are looking at how we can convert barley straw into 6 packs, which we just launched for Corona, or we are making biodegradable keg caps, or the focus that we now have on consistently increasing the recycled content in a lot of our primary packaging, for example, for cans, which we are at around 75% now. So really, it's becoming the core and the ethos of how innovation and transformation also often runs across different verticals and categories.
Yeah, right. So the next part is a myth buster. So basically, is it just for the investors? Do companies really do ESG reporting only for the investors as a stakeholder?
See, how do I put it? So the investors do benefit out of it if you have a consistent reporting mechanism,
Can
which
we
is
take this question from the top? I think I also fumbled
ah,
and there were
go
some.
ahead.
Yeah. Moving on to the next question, that's a myth buster. So, is it just for the investors? Are companies really doing it only for the investors as a stakeholder?
If you look at it from an investor's perspective, they do benefit if you have a consistent framework around reporting on various ESG actions that you have. So it does benefit the investors in certain ways, that they can very clearly look at authentic and credible actions that you are carrying out and reporting on. But to say that it only benefits the investors would be sort of looking at it from a very micro perspective, because a lot of what we talked about right now in different conversations over the previous questions, the impact of that is across, right? Starting off from your suppliers, where we are now working a lot more also with our suppliers to enable them to become more energy efficient, sharing more ideas with them, or potentially finding suppliers who can join us in our sustainability journey also. Those criteria and metrics are also changing. So starting from that first leg of the journey of identifying suppliers and putting sustainability as a metric in your sourcing decisions, to that final leg of finally reaching out to the customers and consumers. One of the reasons we are looking at, how can we make our product chillers more green, because they also contribute to a good amount of greenhouse gas emissions in our larger value chain. So I would say it's quite diverse in terms of the impact that it can create, and the various stakeholders who are also asking for it beyond the investors also.
That's right. That's true. And that gives a holistic perspective to it from which the companies can also start reporting. From that perspective, how can one evaluate the ESG performance? Like, what's the benchmarks or criteria?
I mean, this is a good question. What often happens is many corporates who are starting off on either their sustainability CSR or a larger ESG reporting journey, uh, we often try to create our own internal KPIs and metrics. I would call that out as a very risky thing to do, And I'll tell you the reason for it. The reason for it is that there are already very robust mechanisms on reporting and guidelines for various sustainability ESG actions which exist in the world, which have been thought through by experts. And I think what would really help us all is if we can start referring to those guidelines which already exist and refer to them, because that is something which will ensure consistency. If you look at certain OECD specific guidelines or different UN bodies which have come up with their own guidelines, or if you look at the concept of SDG in itself, if we start jumping more and more into it as corporates and working with more NGOs who have a good grasp over how to report on different UN SDGs, we'll see more consistencies coming across. So I think at some level it requires us as corporates to sort of shed the wheel of us knowing it all, because we, in that case, we'll have to shed it and say, we maybe in this case we don't know it all, so let's reach out to the experts, listen to them, and report accordingly. And that creating that framework becomes important, right? Because then once you have decided what and how you want to report, you'll accordingly create your interventions also, or your existing interventions, you'll start evaluating them in a different way. Because sometimes you'll realize that you maybe just don't need to record that water recharge, but look at how the groundwater table is improving or how many lives you are impacting. So it just makes your own recording metrics also more richer if you start looking at these guidelines which already exist.
Great. Thank you so much for these insightful responses to these brief questions on the topic. Thank you so much for coming today. We hope our viewers enjoyed the session, and we'll be back soon with the next masterclass on this educational series. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Sugandha. Keep it up. Good job.